Berlin, 1923. Two neighbors, both gold holders, both preparing for the same crisis. The first man kept his gold coins in a safe. When bread hit 200 billion marks per loaf, he walked to the bakery. He pulled out a gold coin. The baker looked at him, shook his head, and said, "I cannot make change for that." The man went home hungry. His gold was worth everything and nothing. The second neighbor understood something different. He had already traded half his gold for US dollars. Small bills. He walked to the same bakery. He paid with $1. The baker smiled, gave him bread, gave him change in marks that would be worthless by evening. But the transaction happened. Both men held gold. Only one ate. It wasn't luck. It was how they held it. The forensic record from Weimar Germany reveals something most gold investors never learn. The mistake that destroyed wealth was not holding the wrong asset. It was holding the right asset in the wrong form at the wrong time. And that mistake is about to repeat. Germany was not the first time this pattern appeared. In revolutionary France during the 1790s, the government issued paper currency called assignats, backed by confiscated church land. Within 4 years, the assignats lost 99% of their value. Gold saved those who held it, but not in the way most people think. The merchants who survived were not the ones with gold coins in vaults. They were the ones who had already converted portions of gold into British pounds or Dutch guilders, foreign currency they could spend daily, while keeping reserve gold for the stabilization they knew would eventually come. The ones who held only gold struggled to transact. Gold could not buy a meal. It could only buy a farm. There was no middle ground. The same pattern emerged in Hungary after World War II, the worst hyperinflation ever recorded. Prices doubled every 15 hours. A gold ring could buy a house, but it could not buy dinner. The denomination problem destroyed wealth even when the underlying asset was sound. The historical record shows this pattern across every major currency collapse: Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina repeatedly. Those who survived held a portfolio of transaction assets, not a vault of perfect assets they could not spend. Understanding this requires seeing 5 specific mistakes gold holders make during hyperinflation. Mistakes documented in diaries, diplomatic cables, and death records from Weimar Germany. The first mistake is holding only large denominations. In 1923, a standard German 20-mark gold piece contained 7.16 grams of pure gold. At hyperinflation peak, that amount of gold could buy several months of food, or a small farm, or a business. It could not buy bread. The merchant who accepted gold wanted the full value. He did not have change. He could not return 99% of a gold coin's value in worthless marks. So the transaction did not happen. Anna Eisenmenger documented this in her Vienna diary. She used her husband's gold watch chain to barter for 4 bags of potatoes, not because the watch chain was worth exactly 4 bags, because that was what the farmer wanted, and she needed food. No price, no change, no future transaction. The principle is clear. During hyperinflation, liquidity becomes more valuable than purity. A gold holder with only large coins cannot transact at the street level. They are locked out of daily commerce, while holding the most valuable asset in history. The survivors held fractional gold, small jewelry, coins of different sizes, assets they could trade partially without losing the entire position, assets that could meet them at the level of actual transactions. The second mistake is holding assets without parallel liquidity. The Germans who held only gold discovered that shops would not accept it, not because gold was not valuable, because the shopkeeper had no way to verify purity, no way to make change, and no certainty he could use that gold tomorrow. What shopkeepers did accept was foreign currency, US dollars specifically, British pounds, Swiss francs, paper money backed by governments that were not currently collapsing. Ernest Hemingway documented this in his dispatches from Germany in 1922. He crossed from France with 10 francs, 90 cents Canadian. He and his wife spent the day freely. At the end, they had marks left over. The exchange rate was so favorable that foreign currency bought everything. Meanwhile, a German gentleman could not afford 5 apples. Hemingway paid 12 marks. The German said it was too much. That man had savings. He had worked his whole life, and 12 marks, worth less than 2 cents in real money, was beyond his reach. The principle is that during hyperinflation, acceptability matters more than intrinsic value. Gold has intrinsic value, but if no one will accept it for the transactions you need to make, that value is theoretical. The survivors held a split position: gold for wealth preservation, foreign currency for daily transactions. the ability to move between the two as conditions changed. The third mistake is spending wealth assets on consumables. This is the hardest lesson the forensic record teaches. The people who spent their gold on food during the crisis survived those days. But they did not survive the crisis. When Germany stabilized in November 1923, they introduced the Rentenmark. The new currency was set at the pre-war gold parity. 1 gold mark in 1914 equaled 1 gold mark in 1924. The people who still held physical gold came through with purchasing power intact. The people who spent their gold on potatoes in 1922 got the potatoes. That was the right decision for immediate survival. But they had nothing when stability returned. The principle is brutal. In hyperinflation, you face a choice between preserving wealth and preserving life. There is no option that does both perfectly. The only solution is to hold enough currency to survive without touching the wealth assets. The documented survivors held foreign currency, barter goods, and skills they could trade. They kept the gold untouched. When the crisis ended, they had both survival and wealth. The ones who spent gold for food had only survival. Both were right, but only one came out whole. The fourth mistake is waiting for perfect information before acting. The German middle class made this error systematically. They held war bonds because the government told them it was patriotic. They held life insurance policies because they trusted institutions. One man paid into a life insurance policy for 20 years. When it matured in 1923, he cashed it. He bought 1 loaf of bread, 20 years of premiums, 1 loaf of bread. These were not stupid people. They were educated, doctors, lawyers, professors. They did everything their institutions told them to do, and they were destroyed. The survivors were those who acted on incomplete information early, who saw the money supply expanding in 1920 and moved wealth into foreign currency in 1921, before the crisis was obvious. Before acting was socially acceptable. By the time everyone understood what was happening, the exits were jammed. Foreign currency was unavailable. Gold was hoarded. Transaction assets were gone. The principle is that financial self-defense requires acting when you can, not when you must. The best time to build a diversified crisis portfolio is before the crisis, when action feels unnecessary. The fifth mistake is holding paper claims on gold rather than physical possession. This lesson is specific to the German experience. Before World War I began, Germany had a gold-backed currency. Gold coins circulated freely. The Reichsbank would exchange paper marks for gold on demand. August 4, 1914, the first day of war, the Reichsbank suspended gold convertibility. Paper marks were no longer redeemable, and the government launched a campaign, Gold for Iron. Donate your gold for the war effort. Receive an iron ring stamped with patriotic words. Millions complied. They trusted their government. They surrendered gold jewelry, wedding rings, family heirlooms, in exchange for iron. By 1923, when hyperinflation destroyed the mark, the gold was already gone, not confiscated during the crisis. Donated before the crisis, voluntarily. The people who still held gold in 1923 were those who had quietly refused to surrender it, who had hidden it, who had trusted metal more than promises. The principle is absolute. During currency collapse, only physical possession counts. Paper claims on gold, even from trusted institutions, become worthless or unredeemable. The only gold that matters is the gold in your hands. These 5 mistakes share a common foundation. They assume hyperinflation allows time to adjust. It does not. The crisis moves faster than thought, faster than preparation, faster than transaction. Sebastian Haffner, who lived through it as a boy, described the speed. His father received his salary, immediately bought a monthly transit pass, bought haircuts, converted everything remaining into goods before the next pay period. No one held paper overnight. Every payment was a token to be exchanged the same day. The people who thought of wages as savings were destroyed. The people who thought of wages as temporary, tokens to be converted immediately survived. In January 2026, the United States debt to GDP ratio stands at 124%. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet expanded from 4 trillion to 9 trillion between 2020 and 2022. M2, money supply, jumped 25% in 2020 alone, the largest single-year increase in American history. Central banks globally purchased over 1,000 tons of gold in 2022, over 1,000 in 2023, over 1,000 in 2024, 3 consecutive years above 1,000 tons, double the prior decade's average. These are not the actions of institutions confident in currency stability. These are the actions of institutions, hedging against a scenario they will not discuss publicly. History suggests what that scenario looks like. When governments cannot stop borrowing, cannot stop spending, cannot stop expanding the money supply. The historical record shows the same sequence. First inflation, then acceleration, then the moment when ordinary transactions become impossible using official currency. When systems are stressed, the denomination problem emerges before most people recognize the crisis. Those with large assets but no small liquidity cannot transact. Those with paper claims discover the claims are not honored. Those waiting for perfect information act too late. The documented survivors from Weimar held a specific portfolio: physical gold in multiple denominations, foreign currency in small bills, barter goods with universal demand, skills that could be traded, and most importantly, the mental model built before the crisis that allowed them to act faster than the printing press. The gold holders who failed were not those who held the wrong asset. They were those who held the right asset in a form that could not be used, who trusted institutions that prioritized survival of the system over protection of the individual, who waited for certainty before acting. The difference between these two groups was not intelligence, not wealth, not preparation. It was the understanding that in hyperinflation, the perfect asset you cannot spend is worth less than the imperfect asset you can. That lesson was written in diaries, carved into death records, and documented in diplomatic cables from 1923. It has not changed. The technology has changed. The speed has changed. But the human behavior under currency collapse has not changed. The question is not whether you have heard of Weimar Germany. The question is whether you have learned what the forensic record actually teaches, not the legend of gold saving everyone, the documented reality of gold saving only those who understood how to hold it. The German middle class trusted their institutions. They gave gold for iron. They held life insurance policies and war, bonds and savings, accounts denominated in marks. A policy paid for 20 years bought one loaf of bread. The question is not whether history will repeat. The question is whether you will be among those who prepare while preparation is still possible, or among those who wait for clarity that arrives too late. Subscribe to the Wealth Forum for more analysis drawn directly from the forensic record of monetary collapse. Leave a comment. Tell us what portion of your wealth is held in forms you can actually transact with during a crisis. Because the conversation matters. Because understanding the denomination problem is the difference between holding gold and using gold. When the next currency fails, it will not matter that you held the right asset. It will only matter that you held it in a form you could actually use.